Hello again to another session, Ask the Expert. I am talking today about upgrading ZK. I just mentioned a bit the history of ZK, what kind of changes are to be expected, and then demonstrate a few of the most common upgrading issues that seem to be mostly blocking, but often have a simple solution if it's known what to do. And yeah, as always, I'm Robert, consulting and support engineer here at Potex since almost 9 years now. Yeah, and I think I'll just dig right into it. Maybe you can state in the chat what ZK versions you are currently on. Maybe there's something that is more relevant for you right now, so I don't go too much detail in the very old past, but I'll start quite early in ZK. 5.9. That's roughly where I'm starting. Cool. That's really interesting. Good. So I'll just start with the timeline of ZK. I'll just or mention the major breaking points in ZK on the major changes. Also a few significant features that are potentially having conflicts or maybe are completely optional, so you can ignore some of these things ideally. Yeah, so you see a ZK. I don't start before ZK 3.6 because I personally have no experience about it. So that's really yeah, before my time. So I hope no one is on a version older than 3.6. If you are, your application will mostly be incompatible with ZK5. Somehow ZK4 is missing in the middle. So if you are in this old state, it can be challenging to upgrade, especially if you have custom components. They need to be completely rewritten because the complete communication between client and server has been rewritten in ZK5, and the how to say, yeah, previously it was writing directly HTML DOM from the server, and now it's creating JavaScript since ZK5. So, okay, I'm just reading your update. Okay, and roughly, okay, ZK5 okay, there's a few ZK5, so I'm not too far off. So I will not cover this part today. I'll not start there, because then we just have two separate applications mostly. But there are a few things that remain from ZK 3.6, which are the generic forward composer, which is the convention-based how to say behavior class that you can apply to your components to add Java code that is executed at different lifecycle phases of components and add event listeners using a convention syntax to have event listener methods in your Java class. And this is very often what we see in upgrading in upgrading projects, that this is often used and seems like a blocking issue in combination with the old, we call it the old data binding, which has this special syntax in the Zool file, and it's the annotate data binder. So this is something ZK Plus legacy, I've seen already in the chat, that is the ZK Plus thing that is deprecated since several versions already. I have it somewhere here in the list here, deprecated since ZK7, but it's not removed. And also we can't really remove it because often it's difficult to upgrade an application without this data binding. So it's in there and it will remain for most of the time. I don't have any plans yet, or I haven't heard of plans that this is going to be removed. So whenever you see this kind of data binding with the @ and the curly braces, this is the old data binding. And you will often see this annotate data binder or annotate data binder init in your Zool files. I'll just quickly show what this looks like, and then I'm just going to go on. So it's this kind of initialization and this kind of weird looking syntax, and I'll just show that it works in this simple case up to the recent versions, and more complicated cases also haven't changed with their implementation. Okay, let's go to the timeline. So ZK3 is old, ZK5. Yeah. As said, theming and components and client-side stuff has mostly changed. And since ZK5, also the event threads are disabled by default. And they are also a deprecated feature. Event threads are this development model where you can call a modal dialog, open it, and then the server will wait in the thread until the user clicks the OK or cancel button, and your code will execute exactly at the same place where it was waiting. Now, this is not ideal, not recommended, because it occupies a whole thread at server side throughout the time it's waiting for a user to click. So in high, how to say, if you have many concurrent users, this will just occupy many threads if your application depends a lot on it. So, but it's still there, so you can always enable it if you need this. If you can't refactor the code, otherwise the refactoring is an event listener based mechanism where you call your modal dialog, and then instead of waiting for a return value, it will return immediately, and you register an event listener to get the OK cancel buttons. So the code changes are not a lot different, but it's hard to find out where this happens in the code. So if you have a large code base, it's difficult to capture all the places. So if you need to, you can keep this enabled. And this is what I already mentioned. This is the new way components are built, and this is the way that remains in ZK up to today. We call it server client fusion, where we have Java components and JavaScript client-side widgets, which in the end generate the DOM. So this is this three layers, I would say. We have server-side, client-side, JavaScript, and in the end it generates DOM. And the browser update, the browser view. The next stepping stone was ZK6, which introduced Java 5, which is also very old, Java 5 generics and annotations. So this is the minimum Java version here since ZK6. I don't think this is a problem for anyone, because ZK5 applications also run with Java 8. And with Java 8, you're basically set up to today. I'm not aware of an incompatibility yet that you can't run the ZK5 application with Java 8. If there is one, I'm sure this is easy to work around somehow. But Java is very often just backwards compatible, or in, I would say 99.99% of the cases, there is no problem here. Also, because of the new syntax, ZK6 introduced the selector composer and the new MVVM data binding. That's what we now document in many places of our documentation, where you have this add load binding, add save bindings. Maybe I add this here, add load, add command, and these kind of syntax. Now, where you have these data binding annotations. I see it also was a very quick step. It was mostly upgrading the Java version, not too many other features, and it wasn't very long-lived. So there was very quickly afterwards ZK6.5, which added more tablet and touch and the first responsive features in ZK that are, I would say, very basic, but they have an effect. If you run ZK Max, it will change some of the component behavior by default if you run on a tablet or touch device. So be aware that some of the component styling changes if you upgrade from 5 to 6.5 or later. And in later versions, there's a switch to turn this off if you want to keep the desktop style for every user agent. And then the next major change was in ZK7, where the complete client-side styling was changed and the DOM structure was changed quite significantly. There's a There was CSS3 was enabled to basically get the round corners. So previously all the buttons had a 3x3 table cell grid to have background images for all the different corners of the buttons. And this was completely obsolete. So all these rounded corners are now, or since then, styled with CSS, and also shadows don't require transparent background images anymore. So there are a lot of simplifications, but also if you have custom themes that are older, they need to be almost or heavily refactored. So this is a big thing to consider if your styling is very if your custom styling is very heavy. It also uses less to pre-process the custom themes, so you can't really reuse your old custom styles at all. Basically, you have to redesign. And since then, we have a GitHub-based project for the themes, where you can clone this project down to ZK7 if you need to, and build a theme for the old version of ZK. And every ZK version that's available has a new tag in this repository, so you can always merge changes between the themes if there were some changes, sometimes bug fixes, sometimes new features between major versions, especially new component styles that you need to merge in, otherwise your themes will break when you start a new and when you use a new ZK version and an old theme, it will just miss some files it needs. So you need to merge in these changes for custom themes since ZK7. Before ZK5, it didn't force you to do any of these. It would just fail, and it had no control. Since ZK7, we have this Git-based approach, so you can at least figure out what is changed between the versions and what is missing in your custom themes. So to me, it's a big improvement that we have this Git-based approach, because then we can always go back in the past and see what's needed. Otherwise, it's a very manual approach and very tedious. Also introduces the font awesome icons. So many of your buttons don't need background images anymore, or these small icons can often replace them with an icon font icon. Just makes it reduces the complexity of your custom styles and reduces the number of resources that need to be downloaded. There was a new theme introduced, Atlantic theme. It's used by some people. It's also available in Git, so you can also go back in the history and check the theme changes where needed. If you are forking from this theme, and it needs to be maintained in a similar way. As already mentioned, annotate data binder was deprecated but not removed, so it will still work as before. You just get all these deprecation warnings in your Java code, so you don't accidentally use this for new projects, because it's, as I said, very old and it doesn't occur too often. So it's hard to support these kind of data bindings. And there also is a reason why it was rewritten. I think it wasn't ideal, but if it still does the job, you can keep it. It doesn't need to be removed if this makes your upgrading more easily. Also, ZK7 introduced this kind of, I would say, experimental or idea to have bootstrap theme, which somehow never took off. So it's poorly maintained. So it's better you don't switch to it. If you have it, if you use it already, maybe try to not use it because it's not actively maintained. Better stick with a theme template. Also, the logging API was changed. So previously, it was using the default Java logging in the Java util package, and it's now uses the SLF4J API. And one common pitfall here is that initially ZK introduced the API and an SLF4J implementation binding. So you often get these startup errors about multiple logging bindings. And this is fixed later in ZK 9.5 or 6, I forgot, later here. In ZK 9.5, it's finally removed. Initially, it was the thought was to make the login work out of the box, But in larger applications, this is just annoying if you always have to remove it and it comes up. And yeah, logging configuration is complicated enough, so it's better to not have a default logging implementation, so you can pick the one you need. Event threads were deprecated, but as I said, they still work if your application container allows it. In some containers, they cause problems by default. I don't know which out of my head, but if there are problems with event threads because you update your container, because sometimes thread get stuck because users don't respond, they don't click the buttons, then containers will complain about threads that are stuck for too long. So it's ideally to not use them. Since 2015, you see this one was current for quite a long time. The version 7 was the last maintained update was 2016. There was ZK8, which introduced a few new elements, shadow elements, some MVVM support. They don't have any impact on your integration, on your upgrade, because if you didn't use them before, these newly introduced elements don't or shouldn't have any side effects on your application. The same with the WebSocket integration support. This was the first integration. It didn't replace the Ajax of ZK's client engine. It was just a way to connect a WebSocket with a desktop to share data between a custom WebSocket and endpoint and your desktop to have a separate channel for your custom JavaScript client side. ZK 8.5 did a deeper integration with WebSockets. A big breaking change, especially for MVVM users, which was, I would say, often frustrating and confusing, was the removal of the simple form for form binding and replaced with Java proxies. So if you upgrade from 7 to 8 and you use form binding a lot, it's best to skip all these steps and jump directly to ZK 9.5, where the simple form was restored, so you're no longer blocked with your upgrade, because form bindings can be difficult to migrate. MVVM form binding. Then there's another change that made the Zool syntax or the components a bit more strict. And we have these bindings, hflex, vflex, which have these dynamic sizing, and the width and height, which have static sizing. And they sometimes conflicted and resulted in undefined behavior. And that's why it's now either or, these XOR. You can't use hflex and width and at the same time on a component. At the same time, you can't use vflex and height on a component, and it will throw exceptions if you do so. Unfortunately, these throw at runtime, so you only find it out if you actually do it. Where you have these mistakes, so this requires quite some testing, and the error messages are not really nice. I'll show you one of these later, just so you know what to look out for, and I give you some tips how to locate which component is affected by this. Then there's another change that also gives how to say, confusing error messages that are a bit more difficult to read. It's the config XML for taglet functions. If you don't know what this is, you most likely don't use it, but sometimes people use it and are surprised that something fails during startup. It looks really strange, but it shows quite at the top of your exceptions. You just get many exceptions and it's difficult to spot the top one. Now I'll also demonstrate one of these. They are often confusing and cause lots of time loss if you don't know exactly where to look. Then ZK 8.5 introduced a new theme, which was the ice blue theme, to have a more modern look, a more spacey look, because everything at the time looked larger, screens got larger. Unfortunately, this makes everything look broken if you use the default theme. So if you upgrade to 8.5, you will be surprised that everything looks broken, but there's an easy fix to just use the old theme again. The old default theme was breezed, and since 8.5, the breeze theme is one of the branches of the of the theme template project, where you can or it's no longer the default theme. It's a dependency you can include and switch to, and then things look like before. Yeah, WebSockets. If you don't enable them, ZK behaves as before and uses Ajax to communicate. So if you enable it, of course, this can break in various environments. Because WebSockets are not always supported by all proxy servers, by every network connection, by all firewalls. So this is always something you need to test. So don't just use it. Be sure it actually works in your deployment environment. And also, IE 8 support was dropped in 8.5. I hope this is no longer relevant to anyone. I think IE 8 was on Windows XP, the highest browser you could use. So let this rest in peace at best. So, and new components that were added after ZK 8.5 don't support IE 9 and 10 anymore, only IE 11. So the old components still work up to IE 9, but new components will only be for IE 11. But when upgrading, you don't use new components automatically. So this should not be a blocking issue again. Since 8.6, now we have Java 6. Simple. The minimum Java version was incremented a bit in order to have the modern look also for as a replacement for the Breeze theme and for the previous default theme. We introduced the compact themes, which don't use this large spacing. Somehow this wasn't always a good choice. So yeah, there's now the ice blue theme, and all the other theme pack themes are also available in a compact version. And then there was the first maven dependency change. Sometimes the automatic servlet 3 configuration in the I think it's the Zool jar, cause trouble on different specific application servers. So it's now a separate maven dependency you can exclude in case this causes trouble. I think I won't demonstrate this today. This is a side task. So you will often, it will give error messages like multiple servlets with the same name registered. And then this could be the web fragment dependency could be the cause of this. ZK 9 again raises the Java level to Java 8. Yeah, you see 2020 Java 8 was already, I don't know, 6 or 7 years old. So it was, we are very conservative with incrementing the Java version. One change that sometimes causes issue was the defaulting to CSS-based flex instead of JavaScript flex calculations. So if there are problems, and there is a fallback switch to revert to the original CSS JavaScript-based flexing, and it can be enabled on demand for specific components. So if layout looks majorly broken, it's often that the list boxes, list headers, and list column styles have a problem with this. You can only enable the CSS, the JavaScript flexing for specific components. Then what Diego already mentioned, the ZK Plus legacy is that the old data binding will suddenly stop working when you just upgrade the ZK version. And for this, we have a separate dependency, the ZK Plus legacy, that has to be included if needed. We just saw that sometimes it's developers accidentally use the deprecated classes without knowing it. So if it's not there by default, it doesn't confuse new users which data binding to use, because there's only one that is included by default. And the same for the DSP servlet. There were some security warnings about this one, because it outputs HTML, which is not escaped, but it's the purpose of this servlet is to output unescaped code. So it doesn't it doesn't get included by default, so you don't get these false positives if you don't use this feature. But you can still add this dependency and use the servlet on demand. The 9.1 update was again mostly for security reasons, where we upgraded the jQuery version. This was a long-term requested change, so that's the first version that uses the current jQuery version or a major version, and there is no other change. So the latest version of ZK 9.0 and 9.10 should have exactly the same features, only an updated jQuery version, and everything should work before. So if you have custom components or a heavy use of client-side JavaScript, this is a chance to test whether your scripts work without changing anything else in ZK. Now, because jQuery has breaking changes, and if your code depends on jQuery, it might use breaking code. And if you upgrade directly to a higher version, you don't know if it's a ZK change or a jQuery change that causes problem in your custom JavaScript. So this is dedicated only for the jQuery upgrade. Otherwise, there's no purpose in this release. And jQuery 3.5 fixes a few or the known jQuery vulnerabilities at the time. And we also have patched versions for the 9 version and 8.6 version, where we patched the old jQuery version to use the latest security or to patch the known vulnerabilities. It will still be detected as a version that has the vulnerability, but they are patched in several of these. I don't know out of my head, but the latest 8.6.1.2 or something, I don't know exactly the number, has I have it here. The latest 8.641 has all the patches we know about, and the same, the 9.102 has the latest jQuery patches. And now we come to the current time. Yes, as mentioned, since 9.5, simple form legacy was restored. It uses a different package name, but otherwise it functions like the old simple form. If not, let us know how it needs to be fixed. I hope we restored it correctly so you can migrate your ZK7 project that uses form binding up to 9.5 without having to refactor all your form bindings. As said, SLF4J was removed. I'll show you in a minute. A few other optional dependencies that were very large were removed, like Closure compiler that generates source maps at runtime is usually only needed for development. So it's best to not add it because it's like 10 megabytes of jars added to your WAR file, makes it just big. It can also be excluded in earlier versions. So it has always been optional. Maybe I'm wrong there, but it has been optional in the latest version of every branch. It should be optional, so you can always remove it. There's also a new dependency for the WCHG accessibility features, which is also optional, so it doesn't affect your upgrade unless you need it. Then this one will add lots of code or lots of client-side code that makes the components and widgets more accessible, which might break your custom JavaScript code if you have some. And there's also additional themes with higher contrast that you can add, which you of course have to customize if you need a custom theme based on these. And for the client side, it's not relevant for everyone, but since 9.5, we use the fetch API in favor of the Ajax API, if available. On IE 11, it's not available, so it still uses a polyfill falling back to the Ajax, the classic Ajax handling the client side. And then in ZK 9.6, we're coming to the current time, latest version 9.6.0.1. Don't use 960, use 0.1, which has some hot fixes included already. One big change is the ID generator was changed. The unique IDs for desktop were a bit too, a bit too short for some security concerns, so they are just larger and more random. So it's harder for an attacker to guess a desktop ID. They have always been unique, so they were not reused between sessions, but it was slightly predictable. So this is the new ID generator. You can still configure the old one if the new one causes problems with your testing scripts. So there's a fallback strategy to have the old behavior back. Otherwise, the desktop IDs are, I think, 160-bit long, so much longer than before. Also, this is the first version that introduces parallel JavaX and Jakarta namespace support. So if you need to upgrade to a higher container version like Tomcat 10 or Jetty 11 or Wildfly 25, I don't know the number out of my head, you have to pick the Jakarta edition, which is definitely a breaking change for almost all your servlet code. Otherwise, both the Jakarta and the JavaX edition in ZK are built from the same source code, and it's being run through a post processor that replaces the namespaces. And it's the migration tool supported provided by, I think, a Tomcat, I think. So it's hopefully doing the right thing. If not, let us know. We need to fix this if there are known issues with this. And also the Jasper reports dependency was now removed by default because it is rarely used, also quite large, so it doesn't need to be added automatically. It produces some not too nice startup errors or warnings, which you can ignore or configure out in your loggings. This is expected, and you only need to add it if you really have a Jasper reports component. It's also quite an old Java library, so it's not too popular in my experience. And then ZK10 will be the next version, maybe next year. We don't know exactly when and how long it will be there. We also don't know yet the end of life support for 9.6. So this depends a bit on how fast ZK10 will be. We will reuse the IE support. I think we will definitely remove IE 9 and 10. IE 11 depends a bit on feedback. I think there was a survey recently. We need to decide what to do with IE 11. So if you desperately need it, be loud. And the Edge legacy will also be dropped most likely, because the Edge is now the same as Chrome since a few years already. And I think Microsoft stopped support. And there will be a few new features, I'm sure, in ZK10. Stay how to say, yeah, just watch our forum or our website for announcement whenever there's something new. Okay, so that's the rough history, almost half of the time. So it's roughly what I planned. Let's look into a small application to upgrade, just to see how far we can get, or what kind of approaches there are. So I've seen two major approaches in my time here. So the often is manual upgrading. I see when when we use customers don't use Maven or Gradle. This often goes wrong. Managing jar files is horrible, in my opinion. It's so easy to get it right, to get it wrong. It's not anyone's fault. It's just complicated to get the right versions together. If you download the binary package of ZK, we still support them, we still provide them. You have to really be careful to replace all the jars or remove the jars that were in the old package and add and replace them with the jars from the new package. Decide the ones you need yourself manually. And this is not always obvious. If you just copy everything in, you might easily forget one of the dependencies and have duplicate code, and then ZK will not start up correctly. I'll also show this in a minute. So we recommend using Maven or Gradle, or any kind of dependency management, to at least identify which dependencies are needed. Even if your project needs to copy and paste all the jar files into it, I would still have a side project in Maven just to manage the dependencies, to identify which one are needed. Because in Maven, if you add one of the dependencies, you will get this nice dependency tree that shows what is needed for these kind of libraries. getting or knowing all this manually or in your head is, in my opinion, impossible, and it's a tedious, time-consuming way. So if you can avoid it, avoid manual upgrading, and before upgrading, make sure your project builds with Maven in your old version, and then change the version. Now, don't do a Maven migration and a version change at the same time. I did this a few times to first make sure I can rebuild the same project using Maven, and then version upgrading is technically simpler. And that's what I'm doing here. So we come from 5.07. If we recap the project simple, I only have a Jetty plugin to run this one locally, and I added 2 dependencies, ZK Max and ZK Plus, just to show some things that break. And ZK Max will just use all the dependencies it needs. So there's a Zool jar, the ZK jar, there's a ZK. No, there's no ZK bind jar because it didn't exist in ZK5. We will see this appearing later. Yeah, and then the same thing is available at command line. So you can always do a maven dependency tree. That's what I mean. To do this manually, if you can't integrate Maven directly into your project, just have a side project that has no code, just downloads dependencies. You can still see which versions are put together by ZK as of the current version, just by checking the dependency tree, or build a WAR file, an empty WAR file, and then all the jars will be aligned nicely in the webin folder, webinflip. So that's my tip. If you're not allowed to use Maven directly, use it unofficially as a side project to maintain the dependencies, and then after Maven was building, copy them over in one batch. So don't maintain the files manually. Hopefully this is available. In some situations you don't have internet access, then using Maven is a bit annoying. But then maybe have a side PC to manage this. At least get a list of these things you need. Otherwise, you will copy more than you need. Yeah, and also Maven helps to identify version conflicts. If you have multiple frameworks that need the same dependency in different versions, and you can pick a specific version and avoid double versions of the same jar using Maven. So here we use the simpler approach when using Maven. I always have some kind of ZK version property. So if I want to switch from 5.011 to 5.7, we just run it for now. I hope I have it in a running state. Yeah, it runs. And we just check that it's actually doing what it does. So we have localhost. This was the previous training, 8080. Now the server is running. It's Jetty displaying the files, and the mbc.zool is displaying the current page. We see it's ZK 5.7. We also see the version can be retrieved via the old data binding from ZK Plus. So we have this working. If I click something, the UI reacts, and my sizing of my component is mostly correct. I think there's a gap for a potential scroll bar here. I don't know if this is a bug in ZK 5.07. Could be something, I don't know. So we just upgrade this to 5.11. Now this is the first thing, always get to the latest version in your branch. So you switch the version string, let Maven update, and then you see that these versions will change here. So you see all the dependencies are already downloaded, and whatever needs to be changed or is changed in ZK will appear here in this graph. And you see it will omit duplicate dependencies. And then we'll just stop it and run it again and see that the updated version is running. And we will soon see the first breaking change. So this is just getting warming up a bit. So we have, if we refresh now, it's running 5011. And you see the gap on the right is fixed. So most likely there was a bug in 507, which was fixed at some point later. So now the sizing looks nicer. And there's also, now we look a bit into the project. What I have is a simple Zool page that uses a custom component that initializes the old data binder in it just for fun. A window component, a few captions, the old data binding syntax here, and then a normal layout, and a few components just to occupy some space to see how sizing problems affect the layout later. When we go to higher versions, we use some hreflex here. We use this illegal width versus hreflex, which didn't cause a problem in the old version. It was allowed, but I think the hreflex is overriding the width. But at some point, it's caused undefined loops or something in the client side, so it needed to be more strict to avoid this kind of problem. The MVVM is of course not working yet because we don't have MVVM at this point. I have a few resources that load from jar files, from the class path, a custom CSS file which generates this background color here, this background image. So here's just using the old DSP syntax to demonstrate a DSP file, which we will see breaking in a second. There's a logo image, nothing, just a GIF, a few config files that potentially break if something is wrong, especially custom taglet functions. As mentioned, they need a config name at some point, giving a weird error message from ZK8 if you don't know what this means. So I just have this here. It doesn't contain anything, just showing the error message. And here is my forward composer, default do after compose code, and really just defining a listbox item renderer just to demonstrate the next breaking change. So if we go on to the next major version in ZK, ZK is 6.05, and Control-Shift-O include the dependencies. We will see that this graph here will update. All right, Maven is doing all the work for us, so no manual copy pasting around. Something is red, but I think it's still indexing, and then it will find stuff, I hope. What is the problem here? ZK. Sometimes Maven could not find artifact POM in ZK CE. I didn't have this problem earlier. Let's see if it runs a command line. Sometimes the IDEs have problems. So if you have problems with Maven upgrading, it's always good to test at command line. Just see if we can run the dependency tree and see if it resolves at client side.
Robert, are you referring to 650, not 605?
No, I want a 6.0.
603.
Yes.
I can see that.
You can only see 603, so maybe I'm one version off. Okay, could be I pasted something wrong. Could not find artifact 603 in ZKCE. It should use the eval version. Okay, that's maybe a good test. Let's see what is available. We check our Maven repository, maven sync.zcos.org. And there's the evaluation repository. We check it, org zcos zk, and then it may complain about Zool. If we have this, well, there's 605. I wanted 605. Somehow 603 is not here. 605. Okay. And then it says it can't find ZK. If we go up one level and we check ZK, there is no 602.
Maybe you are on the evil branch here, as you see.
Yes, I know it. Yes, yeah, I know. I thought I had run this before. It's right. Yeah, it's the CE version definitely doesn't have it because some of these versions are only available for enterprise customers, and I didn't add the enterprise repository here. Okay, let me just use 602. This should be available everywhere because I didn't configure the EE repository here. So normally, in more recent version, we have the evaluation versions possible, so everyone can try the EE version. But back then there was this. I think this slightly unfortunate way that we had the same version for eval and for EE without the eval suffix, and then this caused problems. Yeah, so now the evaluation versions are always distinct between old and new version, between EE and eval. Okay, let's see, 602. I just want to see it running. Ah, yeah, now it's downloading. Okay. Yeah. So thanks for the help. So now we have. You see, there's Jasper reports, for example, appeared here in the dependencies. Sometimes the bean shell interpreter was updated because there were some performance or security issues. Especially here, you see that it's loading these POI OOXML jar for Jasper reports, which is quite large. So this is something that you can ignore if you don't want Jasper reports. Just exclude it from your dependency. And also JFree chart is optional. Remove it or exclude it if you don't want it. And ZK bind is new. This is the new data binding for MVVM. So now I know I had this because I get a compiler error if I don't do this. Suddenly I should get it's still indexing. Go on, find it. Don't. Why is it showing up? Okay, I need to cut this out later. What's the time? 17:49. Okay, I'm behind time. Yeah. So what changes now is if we try to compile this, it will break because one change that may affect many people is the renderer's API was changed. So there's an optional parameter here. Now the index was new. This is something very simple. It will just not compile, so you need to change these interfaces, just adding one parameter. So all the tree item renderer, list item renderer, all these renderer interfaces have a new signature here. And if we try again, or now it should compile and we should be able to run it. And we have to skip forward. I don't have that's life changes. So running. See, it's Jetty is outputting lots of warnings in a live environment, but it's running, and we should see version 6.02. You see the styles have been updated. The default theme was changed, but the size is not changed too much. The list items are a bit larger. So maybe this is the first time where things stop fitting everywhere. So you see here, for example, there's a problem with the height calculation of this group box here. It somehow doesn't fit. Yeah, so I think we skip ahead directly to the next version, 6.5, because otherwise here's nothing significant in this version. If we switch to 6.5, Control-Shift-O, this should be faster because it's already cached. I can restart this immediately. I think I don't have the time to activate the MVVM yet right now. That's why I have this Java underscore. It just means don't compile this file because it didn't work in the past. I think I can rename it just to compile it. Okay, and then it will also recognize this class. Okay, but now if we run this version, did it start 6.582? So we have the next version running. So this was easy, and now we see ZK7. I think I have a few pitfalls here in this project. Go on. Okay, so it updated dependencies again, and we see the stuff we don't want to manage manually. There's this commons codec, which is often forgotten. If you don't have this, the custom theme, the new themes don't work anymore. So this gives, if you forgot to manually copy this over your old project from the packages, you get annoying error messages. I know it's already running, so let's see. No, it's not running. Need to restart. Now it should run, compile, of course, and yep, and reload. So now ZK7 is running, and here we should see, oh, here see again some sizing changes, make it less. So things get a bit bigger over time. So you have, from time to time, you have to adjust your sizing, your style, or have a custom theme that reduces the size of components. Yeah, and if you looked into the start, I think we don't have time right now. We will see that several components are a lot simpler than before. For example, here these tabs with the round corners, just use. Come on, let me resize this. Yeah, suddenly you see CSS3. At this time, it was very modern to use the border radius. Yeah, this one. This one avoided a lot of DOM elements that were previously necessary, and suddenly you could have these round corners. And that's why almost every component was restarted that needs these gradients or round corners that don't depend on background images anymore. Okay, and then the next one, now we should see something break again. If we go to 8.0, we saw in the timeline 8.0, what should break is hflex width and height conflicts, and the tag-lib function XML will cause issues if you have any of these. So if we start to, I try to start the project now. Everything looks okay. I open a page. Yeah, suddenly it complains about not allowed hflex and width at the same time, except for hflex min. So you can use hflex min with the width, but not with a dynamic resizing option. So we need to fix this. I think I don't have time to debug now. What I would do is I would put a breakpointer in this method where it happens. We see the method here 6.5, and then we see if we put a breakpoint here, we see which component it is, and then it makes it slightly easier to search for things. And it doesn't give you exact position where it happens because it's a Java exception that doesn't know the Zool position where it happens. So we need to remove the width 300 pixels because we want it to hflex. And if we run the page now, it fails in another way. Suddenly all the styles are gone. And even if we refresh, they don't come back. But instead we get lots of error messages that look like this: failed to load resource, blah, blah, blah. So it fails to load any of the DSP resources. And if you see these kind of fails to load DSP resource, you have to go all the way to the top of all these error messages and find the first one, which tells you what to do. It's slightly unfortunate. but it's this cascading problem here. So we have the first exception says hflex-min, which we fixed already here. It says config name is required in the TLD config file. That's the one you have to find. Then you know what to do. The rest is just due to failed startup of ZK or due to failed configuration. So we fix our config file in the TLD, and this can be in any jar file in your project. So any jar file can contain TLD tag-lib functions that are missing a config name. So you can set any config name there. It just has to be there, and then it will be quiet about this. Many customers got stuck with this one and thought they can't upgrade anymore. The theme is not working, and they were wondering if the styles are not applied. But it's just something as fundamental as this. And then things are not yet back because it's caching the wrong file. So you have to control F5, and then the styles should be back. And now we are on 8.0.5. You see the old data binding is still outputting the ZK version, and the rest is still working as before. Doesn't fit, of course, but that's expected right now. Okay, so now we can move on to the next version. 8.5. What should break here? I'll not stop in 2 minutes. I'll just finish this walkthrough. And we have the upgrade ZK timeline. So in 8.5, we expect, of course, we don't know in advance, but we expect the theme to change. So everything should be now in ice blue theme. So if we restart now, we will see something, or we will see that that everything changes. It feels like ZK is no longer compatible. So if we reload the page, it needs to start first. Okay, started. And suddenly nothing fits at all anymore. So this is the new ice blue theme, which is very spacey, which has lots of margins and paddings by design. It's design. I don't argue with designers. I stopped doing this. If that's the new fashion, then that's it. But we made sure there's a fallback, so you can switch back to the previous theme, which was Breeze. So you just enable an additional dependency, and you have to set the preferred theme in your Zool file in your ZK XML. And I forgot to copy this here. Oh. Does someone know how to change this out of their head? I need to find it. It's in the release notes. So ZK release notes. When you go to the 8.5 version, 8.50. Oh, where's the article here? I breathe a package. Here, this is the only one where the document is not linked. Oh, here, there's a new feature doc. So this one is the full story about this. And we try to have one of these for every version, and it will mention how to use the old theme. This one here. Now we just copy this into ZK XML and refresh dependencies to 8.5 and restart the project. So what we did is we added the Breeze version, and now we should be able to reload and see the things as before. Control F5. Did it set the cookie? Clear all the cookies and Control F5. I think I forgot something somewhere. Control F9. I said the Breeze is added. ZK XML default theme preferred Breeze. Stop and restart. Can someone see what I'm missing? We have the timeline here. No, it should be available here. That's the right version. Okay, let's restart. Okay, now we're back to Breeze. So it fits as before. No, not completely, but it's we see it's the same theme as before. So it's not lost. We can continue using Breeze. And if you have a custom theme based on Breeze, you just need to change the branch in the theme template project to continue working from there. Okay, so this is this one in 8.6. Yeah, we have the new compact theme, the ice blue sea. So if you need the modern theme with the old styling, with the old sizing, you can use this one. I won't demonstrate right now. This is just a new feature. And what I mentioned before is a web fragment, which I didn't use here in this example. So we just switch on to ZK9, and we should see that that these two are missing or breaking. POM XML. So we skip the 864, just go to 9 directly, Control Shift O. Yeah, then it's switching dependencies to the 9 version. And yeah, you see that the dependencies change over time. Now the Commons Codex there's a new one, the JSON, that's required by something. I think there is somewhere the Google Closure compiler, which is the JavaScript compiler for the source maps, which you can exclude if you don't want it, because it really makes your Java file a lot bigger. And some people are concerned with Google code in their code base, so it's definitely optional. And see, it's starting. It's again failing to start up. This time it says it can't load the DSP servlet because this was removed. We can enable this in the dependencies via the DSP, the web DSP dependency. And also we just enable the ZK Plus legacy to have the data binding, the old data binding back. Done, yeah. So now the application should start again. Who's here? So initialization done, upgrade ZK. Okay, and now we load it. Yeah, okay, so that's the new version. One thing that happens from time to time is that if you have a custom theme and you don't upgrade the theme, and you use an old version here accidentally, or you have a theme that is based on an old version, you will miss the styles for the new components. This also gives a specific startup error or a load time error. Is it runtime or startup error? We'll see. So whenever your theme doesn't match, you get not obvious, but you get an error message that is recognizable. So if you reload the page, it looks all right, but you should have, were there new components in ZK9? Of course, everything is ZK9 now. I need to go to the, I just skip this one. I go to 9.51, but I still have an old theme for ZK9.1, and then the new component styles for 9.5 are missing, and then we get a specific error message. Did it update? Not yet, not yet. Come on, come on, come on. Okay. Just restart again. Okay, and if we load the page now, it should complain again. I don't know why it doesn't complain. Okay, I want to demonstrate something failing, but somehow it doesn't fail right now. Why? Why does it not fail? It's using the old Breeze version, and the old Breeze version shouldn't have, because I'm not using these new components. I need to use any of these new components. So if we, for example, add the, what is a new component? Signature. Shift, Control, Shift, O. I thought this would happen. No, it maybe doesn't happen because the logging. What I do is because the logging will now not work anymore. We also need to add the logging appender, so we get log information. As you see, the log are a lot shorter now during startup because the default logging implementation isn't there, and I just pick one logback classic SLF4J. There's a Java version. There's a log4j integration. There's a simple logger, so they have multiple integrations here. And let's see, does it run again? Oh yeah, here's a signature component, and it's still not failing. So I'm somehow not able to make it fail. I want to demonstrate this. And what you will get is also these kind of missing DSP files in the log if your theme doesn't provide the correct files. Somehow I can't get it to fail right now in the expected way. So the last thing I wanted to show was the missing logging. So now if we update the dependencies again, we should get the logging implementation added, which is something you normally don't add to your project. It's provided by your container because most of the containers have their own logging implementation. But during development, it's nice to have details like this debug messages. And here you also see the remove Jasper reports error message, this debug and warning message, no class diff found error, because Jasper report is just ignored due to the missing dependency. It doesn't mean your application doesn't work. It just means you don't have an optional dependency. And if we load again, we should see the 9.61. Yeah, and here's a signature component doesn't work because the styles are missing most likely. So if we fix this back to ZK version, we should see the styles at least back. And then we have done all the way from 5.0 to, oh, there's a question. 5.0, I remember list item render for list box, but after 5.6 adds the X index parameter. Yes, exactly. How to upgrade to ZK8 or above? Ah, yeah, okay. You see, just up. I think I went above ZK8 now. Or was there something special? Because the list item renderer is still working. Well, it didn't change anything right now. I didn't have to change this code anymore. It's still working. The Jasper reports, debug error message. And if we reload, I hope the signature component is now. What am I missing, Gene? It doesn't do anything. It's the canvas. This is a bug. Okay, at least we see the old data binding is still working. Our custom component is working. We only have for some reason, the signature component doesn't do anything. We need to investigate offline. This is live. Things break from time to time. So we have the list box still working. We have our fields updating. And then, of course, your application is more or less complicated, mostly larger. So there will be lots of smaller things that appear that are not these kind of common issues. So today was the purpose to demonstrate the the blocking common issues that are hard to guess or hard to figure out. I hope this was somewhat helpful, just to get these kind of awareness. Technically, ZK5 and ZK 9.6 are still based on the same principles. Yeah, we have the server-side components, client-side widgets that generate DOM. So there's nothing new here. For old applications, of course, there are new components and new features that have been added over time, which should not block updating. Some optional parts have been removed by default, but they can be re-added if needed. So I hope this gives some confidence when updating. Definitely things will, or not definitely, but likely things will break when updating a larger application. That's why it's always good to have automated tests running that verify that the basic behavior is still working. But most important, application needs to start and to compile properly and in a reproducible way. And that's why that's where Maven or any kind of dependency management tool helps a lot. I think manually updating all these jar dependencies, I wouldn't have been able to in this hour or 17 minutes. So it's definitely a big help to have managed dependencies. Can only recommend doing this. Okay, then I think I've come to the end of today's talk, today's training. Are there any other questions I have missed something significant that you were interested in? Otherwise, write it in the chat. I will sometimes reply offline, as said. Okay, so just final announcement. Today will be my last training session here. So I'm moving on to a different company from next week on. So I would like to say thanks to everyone, and I have I always enjoyed these kind of training sessions. I always liked your feedback, and I think I will still be around in the forum from time to time because I'm still working with ZK. So maybe we see a different place again later. All right. Otherwise, have a good time. Enjoy coding, and next time a teammate will maybe will hold this training. All right. Bye-bye. I just stopped the recording.